In 1969, in the late 50s and 60s, the Strategic Air Command had an operation called Chrome Dome. They launched B-52s from SAC, or Strategic Air Command bases, from around the world into the skies with nuclear weapons. And they were up there 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And the object was to be close enough to the Soviet Union or to China to get the first strike in. And so there's missions being launched from all the different SAC bases and even some satellite bases around the world. This particular mission originated from K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base in Michigan. The pilot had a B-52, a B-52H model. The serial number was 60-0058. He remembered the serial number. It was his plane. He took off. He had 4 Mark 28 nuclear weapons, 1 megaton each. And his mission was to fly in a certain configuration near the Arctic Circle. And he was to do this for a 12-hour period. There was a relief crew in the craft with him, and they would be refueled,
right,
I think 2 or 3 times during this mission. As they took off, they flew towards their first waypoint, which was near Hudson Bay. There's 2 decks to a B-52. The pilot and the co-pilot sits up in the upper deck. In the lower deck is the flight engineer, the electronic warfare officer, or the one that launches the nuclear weapons, and a gunner. Now, the gunner in the old days would be in the back of the aircraft, but the newer versions had the gunner sitting down in the lower area of the aircraft. The flight engineer radioed that there was an intruder on the aircraft. The pilot told the co-pilot, go down and figure out what's going on down there. And so the co-pilot went down. Now, remember, every single crew member on a B-52 is armed with a .38 caliber revolver for survival purposes and any other reasons. The co-pilot went down, confronted the flight engineer, and the flight engineer pointed towards a walkway or crawl space between the flight engineer area and the bomb bay area. And so the co-pilot looked in there and saw this entity. He called it an entity. It was a funny-shaped humanoid with large jowls, large eyes, and protrusions on the top of its head, in a silvery suit, holding some kind of device in one hand and a ball in the other hand. If I was confronted at 45,000 feet with something like that, I don't know what I would even think or what I would do.
That's a hard call.
It was a hard call, but the pilot decided he was going to take out whatever entity. At first, they thought it was a stowaway. Somebody got aboard our craft, penetrated security, and was going to disrupt our mission.
Right.
So what he did was he pulled out his .38 and shot this thing twice. It fell down in the bomb bay. Now, the bomb bay doors are shut. The pilot had immediately dropped to another altitude, fearing that something was going to happen in the bomb bay. Now, that just took that aircraft out of mission. They couldn't. They had to land. The closest base to land was a Goose Bay Air Base in Labrador. So they immediately radioed, sending flash messages to Goose Bay and to their base at K.I. Sawyer, and they ended up landing at Labrador. Now, when they landed at Labrador, Air Force Security Police and Canadian Security Forces arrived. They weren't sure exactly how to get this thing out of the bomb bay, so they figured they'd just open the bomb bay doors slowly, which they could do in the H model. In the other models, they just
popped open.
Yeah, popped open, the B, C, and D model. So they opened it, and this thing falls on the tarmac. It's a humanoid of something, but it was dead. There's no life functions to it, according to the colonel that was telling us the story. So medical personnel came, Canadian medical, it's a Canadian Forces base. Canadian Forces medics came out, put this thing in the body bag, and took it into the infirmary or some other place. And now he had to decide, And SAC had to decide, what do we do from here?
Right.
I mean, we just killed an alien on board our aircraft. And this is the message, and he told us verbatim, this is the message I sent. We just killed an alien. I don't know how he got aboard. It was an intruder, and we killed it. And now what do? SAC didn't have an answer to him. He said, maintain crew rest there. And now, to maintain crew rest on a plane that's armed with four nuclear weapons, they had to stay in the aircraft because they had to guard it.
Right, they can't go anywhere.
They can't go anyplace. They can't leave the aircraft because they're the ones who are responsible for the aircraft and for those 4 nuclear weapons that are in the bomb bay door. So eventually they told them to take off and fly directly back to K.I. Sawyer. They did. They landed at K.I. Sawyer in northern Michigan, and they met with Air Force OSI, who took the whole crew into a building, questioned them individually, and said at the end, brought them all together and said to them, this Air Force OSI agent, he said he had a crew cut and he's been around a long time. You could just tell on his voice that this OSI agent's been around a long time. And the OSI agent told him, what you think happened over the Hudson Bay never happened. You didn't shoot anybody aboard that craft. There wasn't any extraterrestrial aboard that craft. You had oxygen problems, and you had hydraulic problems, and that's what happened. And that's why you landed at Goose Bay, and that's why you had to fly back here.